So I am going to demonstrate a simplified palette that is very effective, at least I think so, for painting all human beings. I'll put this up on the wall so you can see it, but this is 4 colors. I mentioned it last week. It's permanent red light, yellow ochre, raw umber, and ultramarine blue. Titanium white is also added to that. So when I have this here, this is permanent red light and yellow ochre. This could also, permanent red light could also be cadmium red light, but just keep in mind that is a toxic pigment, so you want to make sure not to get it all over your hands and whatnot. Mixing the 2 of them together gives me kind of an orange here. It's an earth yellow. It's not a primary yellow, so it is a slightly more neutralized yellow, which is actually beneficial for painting human beings. Generally speaking, earth colors are very practical for painting us because we don't have a lot of highly saturated colors. Say like the turquoise drop cloth that we're working with today, we're not going to see a lot of that much color intensity when we're painting skin tones. So the red and the yellow ochre mixed together gets this color. The yellow ochre and the raw umber mixed together gets you kind of a yellow green. Ultramarine blue and raw umber together gets you pretty much a greenish black. And then the ultramarine blue and permanent red light will get you a more neutralized kind of purple. You can think of this side of the color wheel as the warmer side and this side as the cooler side, but all color is contextual, so try not to treat that like a universal idea necessarily. Here on the interior, I've added just a little bit of titanium white to those colors, and you can see how that lightens it, but it also neutralizes it. When we say neutralizing it, we mean it is desaturating it or pushing it towards gray. Can we all see how this red looks more chromatically intense than this when white is added to it? This is kind of dulling it down. So anytime we're adding white, we're heightening the value, lightening the value, but we're dulling down the color as well. On the other side of the color wheel, the raw umber will do a similar thing, but act as a darkening agent as well. So raw umber will darken and neutralize. Titanium white will lighten and neutralize, meaning take the saturation away. Okay. Most of the colors, when we think of saturation, straight out of the tube is where it's going to be in its most saturated form. Generally speaking, not all colors are like that. Earth colors are very neutral, straight out of the tube. This is raw umber and burnt sienna. Then I would say the yellow ochre, which is also an earth color, is less saturated straight out of the tube. All my other colors are more saturated. But today, I'm only going to be using these 4 colors. So it might look like I have a lot of other colors on my palette. That's just residual paint from previous painting times. So today it's titanium white, yellow ochre, permanent red light, ultramarine blue, and raw umber. So you can think of this as an amended primary palette. We basically have a primary red, a primary blue, and an earth yellow. I mentioned last week that this is an amended Anders Zorn palette. So Zorn, instead of using raw umber and ultramarine blue, would just use lamp black, which is a blue black, and that's how he would basically skip this step and just have one singular color. Because of that, you don't get a lot of saturated blues in his paintings, but so adding the ultramarine blue gives you a little bit more range in the saturated side of blue. Questions about this so far? Right?
I've got a bright red. Is that going to work?
Probably.
Okay.
We'll take a look at it. I'll take a look at everybody's colors today.
Great, thanks.
So today we have warm yellow-orange light, the studio light. When we have warm light, it's going to shift the shadows relatively cooler. With incandescent light, it's going to be a more dramatic shift in temperature, so it's going to be more perceptible, at least I think so, when it's going to be more perceptibly warm in the light, and it's going to be more perceptibly cool in the shadows. So I'm going to use myself as a model for this demo. I'm going to just use the spotlight that's currently on me, and I'm going to use this palette to mix up a general cool shadow value and a general warm light tone. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's kind of a stupid question, but I still, something with the vocabulary. So is this incandescent light, or is the incandescent light the whitish light, or is this incandescent light?
This is incandescent light.
Okay,
Yeah.
Finally, okay.
Yeah. What do you mean whitish light? Where would
Because I thought that incandescent light was, you know how the lights now are kind of white, the bulbs?
Mm-hmm.
I get confused between, when you said studio light, and I thought, is that incandescent white?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Light?
Incandescent light's generally going to be warmer, so going to be more of a yellow to orange range. All light has temperature to it, so there's no such thing as a pure white light, especially when we're talking about painting. So short answer, somebody asked, they're not going to be making incandescent bulbs anymore. You can still tune LEDs to be warmer or cooler, and that's what we're looking at. We're actually going to replace these lights in the classroom with LEDs that are tuned to these specific, hopefully over the winter break.
So is there a difference between the LED, of the warm and coolness of LED light bulbs and the older incandescent one? Is there a difference?
They're trying to match it, basically, purposefully, right?
Okay.
So there's a reason why we have these we chose these temperature lights in the studio, because we specifically wanted to have warm incandescent light that will create cool shadows. When we open the blinds, though, we will get cool daylight, which will flip it, and we will get warm shadows. I'll show you that in just a little bit. So for today, on the light side of things, my skin tone is going to lean towards this, and on the shadow side, it's going to probably lean towards this blue and purple here. Okay. Think of skin tone as just like any other local color. It's the color that your skin is, right? But every color can have a warm and cool version of itself. So if, say, I mixed up something around this area for my hand today, which would be the permanent red light and yellow ochre with titanium white, on the shadow side, it's going to be very close in proximity on the color wheel. So it's going to just shift slightly towards this cooler purple side of that same color. So it's not going to go all the way across the color wheel. It's just going to shift slightly in a close proximity on that color wheel. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if I'm mixing up a general cool shadow, I'm going to look at my hand here. This is a little confusing because I'm getting some reflected light off of the orange cabinets here. But I'm going to basically start with the closest color that I'm seeing, which is going to be blue. So ultramarine blue here. And I'm seeing it as purple. So blue and red together will make a purple. But I want to make sure that it stays cooler. So I'm going to make sure I have more blue than I have red in here. Also, just keep in mind, some of these colors are weaker or stronger than others. Particularly the ultramarine blue is probably going to be the strongest in this palette. Raw umber is very weak, and then these two are probably a mid-range in terms of strength. What I mean by that is you need more of the pigment to overtake other pigments, because some pigments have a stronger mixing intensity. I added just a little bit of white to it, which will lighten it, but it's also going to neutralize it. It might be a little too light, so I'm going to add a little bit of the raw umber, So I'm basically mixing a purple gray right now. Maybe this is a little bit too dark.
It's hard to see the colors.
Yeah, it's probably going to be.
The piles of paint are gigantic.
This is just me mixing this color wheel here. So try to just look at this area where I'm mixing. So this is where I would go for a general cool dark today. I'm going to just some imaginary cylindrical forms here. I'm going to just lay that in. I'm going to mix up basically 3 color swatches today. So purple gray, cool shadow information today. For the light side of things, again, I'm just looking at my hand as a reference. The color that I'm seeing the most of is red. I'm going to pull a little bit of red. I'm also seeing some of the yellow ochre, which is going to get us into this orange territory. Probably a little bit too much yellow ochre, so I'm going to add some more red. This is too saturated. So I'm going to desaturate it by adding some white. Maybe it could be warmed up just a little bit for my eye. I'm basically comparing this to what I'm perceiving here and saying, how can I change this mix to match more closely what I'm perceiving on my own hand? I'm going to add a little bit more yellow ochre to that to warm it up. Maybe a little dark, so I'm going to add a little bit more white. But that's kind of this would be my general light side of things. So when I'm blocking in information for this painting, this is where I would start. Just a general warm light, general cool dark. So they're different.
What have you got the background toned with?
Just my sludge from my
Sludge.
leftover solvent stuff. So kind of a neutral. It's got all colors mixed together. So when I go to block in the first pass of blocking in the figure, I'm going to keep it really simple today and just do a general cool dark shadow and a general warm light light side of things. The third piece of information, color information that I want to mix up is the transitional midtone value, which will always be the area where we have the most saturation. So right before we roll into shadow is where we're going to get the most color, quote unquote. So I'm going to take the same mix that I had here, and I'm just going to look at the area right before I roll into shadow on my hand, and I am seeing more red in there. It's not straight red, but it's just a little bit more red, maybe even a little bit more yellow ochre too. So this is a midtone. I've darkened it by adding 2 midtone colors to it. All color has value information attached to it. Maybe a little bit more red. That's too much. So sometimes you go.
Looking around your knuckles.
I'm looking like right here, yeah, right before.
Perfect.
Yep. So I added too much red, so I got to counteract it and just really quickly mix it again.
I think I'm gonna
So,
pause for a second.
so I have a general warm light, a midtone that has a little bit more color information, a little bit more saturation to it, and a general cool dark. In addition to that, we're gonna have reflected light and we're gonna have our lightest light. So let me go just 2 steps further. I'm gonna take and add the highlight side of this, which is basically gonna be a lighter version and a duller version of the color that I mixed up secondarily. So it is a little bit more red, a little bit more yellow ochre, but it also is much more lighter and much less saturated. Go here. And then on the flip side, for reflected light, I'll do the same thing, but just take my shadow mix and lighten it just a little bit. And there we have a relatively simplified cylindrical form.
Look at the sunset.
Yeah. Let's pause that, and let's not to get too confused with daylight, because these studios are built to face north, so we never get direct sunlight. When you have direct sunlight, it's a different temperature. It's the color that the sun currently is, and it gets warmer as it gets closer to the horizon. As it goes higher in the sky, it's going to cool off, but generally speaking, direct sunlight is warmer than indirect daylight. So why these studios were built the way that they were was so that we could get blue daylight, basically, uninterrupted blue daylight. So the sun is hitting the atmosphere is illuminating like a filter, and that filter is getting into the classroom, even though the sun is not directly hitting us right now, right? So it's a filtered type of light. With that, it's a subtler type of light. So I'm looking at my same hand, and in daylight, it's going to be a lot more subtle, it's going to be a lot more nuanced. So values are going to be closer together, and temperature shifts are going to be closer together as well. So this is the mix that I had for our incandescent studio light, which is a warm light and creates cooler shadows. We're going to create the opposite here for the daylight. I'm going to look at my hand, and I'm going to look at the shadow that I have on the shadow side, and I'm going to try to mix this color up. I'm seeing a purple again, but it's a little bit more of a warmish purple, so there's going to be more red in it. So let's jump there first. Red first. Add some blue to make it purple. Added too much blue, so it's too cool right now. So I'm going to warm it back up by adding some more red.
Could you point to the shadow that you're looking at on your hand?
Here. But like I said before, it's more subtle than that, so it's not this red. This is much too red right now. So what I'm going to do is add some raw umber to it, which again will neutralize it, push it towards gray, and also darken it slightly. And I'm going to lighten it just a little bit, and also desaturate it with a little bit of white.
I just need to check. Okay. In between your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm going to lighten it just a little bit more. Like I said, the contrast is going to be lower, meaning the values are going to be closer together. Try not to let this confuse you, but I'm seeing some green in here as well. So when we add green to a red mixture, it's going to neutralize it even more. So to do that, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow.
Is that reflected light?
Maybe it might be the green from this. Yeah, yeah. But so now I have, by adding that little bit of a greenish mixture into it, I've pushed the red so it's a little bit more neutral.
Sorry.
So really what I'm talking about is a slightly warm brown right now. Okay, so shadow side here is much warmer than that, at least to my eye. Okay, on the light side, I'm gonna mix up. The first color that I'm seeing is yellow.
Where are you looking for the light?
On the top of my hand right here. And there's some red in there, but this is much too warm. So I'm gonna cool this off with some blue. The light itself is actually blue. So this is gonna push it towards green actually. So here, this looks pretty okay. I'm gonna add just a little bit more red. And the balancing act is, if you're going across the color wheel, say reds and greens, they neutralize each other. They cancel each other out, they create gray. What you wanna do is just add enough of that opposite color so that it neutralizes it, but doesn't push it towards the warm side of the color spectrum. Okay? This is a little dark, so I'm gonna lighten it with just a little bit of titanium white.
So yellow.
It's very yellow. I'm gonna add just a little bit more blue back into that. So this is what I'm seeing on my general light side. Same hand, very different than what we mixed up before, okay? Just while I'm here, I'm gonna do my lightest side of this just by adding some more white to that for the highlights. Like I said, same thing as this on the previous one. So it'll be lighter and duller. And then, like I said, for this mix, right before I roll into shadow is where I'm gonna have the most saturation. So in that area, I'm seeing a little bit more red, but it's a cooler red, so I'm gonna add a little bit of blue to it as well. So I'm essentially adding a purple to it. And maybe
Just point the, where you're seeing it.
like right in here. Maybe my thumb right here. A little bit more. And again, this is a mid-tone. Okay. So that is roughly what I'm seeing on the cool light side of things. Let me put my reflected light in there. It's just a lighter version of this color. And there we go. So same hand, same skin tone, two different light sources. This is warm light and cool shadows. This is cool light and warmer shadows. Okay. So they're quite different from each other.
Can you repeat that?
So we have warm light here and cool shadows, and we have cool light, blue daylight, and warmer shadows.